Story time about how I stole a famous celebrity's boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Growing up, I loved the fashion industry and loved clothes. I knew I wanted to make that my job in the future. And just to let you guys know, I'm not the prettiest girl. I'm not anything special in terms of looks, but I'm pretty funny and I have a really great personality. When I was 16, I moved to New York to become a fashion stylist, and I quickly started gaining traction. I became an intern at a really big fashion house, and this helped me a lot. As you can imagine, I started meeting a lot of celebrities and just really important people doing this. Although I never really got to style anybody, I was still in the room when they were there for fittings and different things. After a few years, I quit that internship and went into another company. This new company, I was getting paid more and I was just happier in general, and I was able to style a bunch of people on my own. I wasn't styling any celebrities or anything like that, but just basically people that worked in the industry and people that had different events to attend. But one day this celebrity comes in, and no, he's not an A-list or anything, but he's pretty famous. He came in with his girlfriend, who at the time was also famous. I basically had to style both of them for an event, and it was really fun. But here's the thing. Clearly, he thought I was really funny, and we were making jokes back and forth. The fitting took longer than usual because we had some pieces coming in, so we had to wait for them to come in for them to try it on. But she was clearly annoyed. Obviously, waiting around for clothes is not the most fun thing, but at the same time, we were giving them champagne, we ordered them amazing food, and she was literally getting her tushy kissed. I could tell that he was really embarrassed by her behavior. At one point, he even told her just to sit down and relax, which she did eventually. I left them alone for a few minutes before the clothes arrived. Once they arrived, I came in and I gave him the pieces. She literally ripped the dress out of my hand and went into the changing room. He looked at me and apologized and said, you know, she's just in a bad mood today. And I said, I totally understand. This was my job, so I knew I couldn't react any other way, but I wanted to slap her across the face. While she was changing, he started making small talk with me. I made a few jokes and it actually made him laugh, which I was really surprised. And then he even complimented me about what I was wearing. I mean, I did look really good. Once she came out of the dressing room, she started complaining right away about the fit. It didn't surprise me whatsoever, but at the same time, I just really couldn't believe how she was acting. Then I realized that she was probably jealous because he was talking to me. He was like going out of his way to talk to me. They finally left and he said bye. But 2 days later, he comes back by himself. He wanted me to style him for an event coming up that weekend. And that's when I realized I needed to take advantage of the situation. I had the feeling he liked me, but I wasn't going to come out and say it. So I turned up the charm 1000%. We talked for about 2 hours. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I stole a famous celebrity's boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I knew I had to make my move now or it would be never. The fact that he came in 2 days later and by himself, that let me know that he liked me. Like I said in part 1, he was there for a few hours. We totally hit it off. We even talked about each other's families and what our favorite foods were. So that's when I asked him if he wanted to have a quick dinner. Trust me, I was so nervous to ask him, but I knew I had to do it. And he said yes. We finally got to the restaurant and sat all the way in the back. I kind of got the feeling that he didn't want anyone to see us, but it made sense. That's when I asked about his famous girlfriend. Then he quickly apologized for her behavior and told me that she's never really like that, and I told him that I'm used to being treated that way by celebrities. And he said that I didn't deserve that kind of behavior from her. That's when I asked him if he was happy with her. I could tell the question caught him off guard because he didn't really know how to respond, and that's when he told me that he was happy with her, but he didn't know if the relationship would actually go anywhere. We proceeded to have a few drinks, and I could tell this was really loosening us up. Out of nowhere, I grabbed his hand and kind of massaged it, but he didn't pull it away. That just confirmed the fact that he liked me. Then he asked me for my phone number. We said goodnight and went our separate ways. But for the next week, he texted me every single day saying good morning. Of course, we would text pretty much all day long. I finally decided to tell him how I felt, which he obviously already knew, and he told me that he felt the same. Then he was the one that asked me out, and we actually went to the beach. We were at the beach for about 6 hours and we had such a great time. At the end of the beach day, I kissed him and asked him if he really wanted to be with his girlfriend. He stayed quiet and didn't answer, but the following day he messaged me and told me that he broke up with her. Here's the bad news. We only dated for 3 weeks. On the 3rd week, he actually broke up with me and told me he was dating someone else. I saw it coming. He's now dating another celebrity. The relationship isn't public yet, but I have a feeling they're gonna announce it soon. I keep texting him and asking him to take me back. I was actually falling in love with him. What should I do, you guys? The more serious we got about the relationship, the worse he became. For example, at the beginning of our relationship, we always used to hang out with our friends. And sometimes I would hang out with my own friends on my own. But 2 months into the relationship, he began guilting me. He would tell me that I would rather hang out with my friends, which wasn't even true. And then I would end up staying home and then he would go out with his friends. He would also tell my parents sometimes that I needed to be taught lessons, like how to respect men and stuff. My parents detested him. One time he came over for Thanksgiving and basically told me that I needed to go change my clothes. He even said that I looked like a whore in front of my cousin. After that, my cousin really hated him and began doing her own research. She found that he was liking girls' pictures on Instagram and that he was leaving dirty comments on their pictures. Once she found all this information, she told me and I confronted him. He told me that he had every right to comment on anyone's pictures because it was just the internet and it wasn't real life. I kind of had to accept what he said because I didn't want any more problems. I asked my cousin to stop searching stuff, but she just didn't let up. Almost every single week, she would send me screenshots of things that he'd comment on girls' pictures. Finally, I told my boyfriend that my cousin had found all this out, and he basically forced me to cut her out of my life. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I stay with him? But when things were good, they were really good. He was super loving, affectionate. He always wanted to be with me, and he always prioritized going on dates and having fun. He would always surprise me with fun things. One time he planned this beautiful picnic, and we even stayed in the park and spent the night there. But then he would manage to ruin everything by becoming really jealous and controlling. My dream job was to work in marketing, and I just happened to land this internship at a really popular fashion magazine. When I told him I got the job, he acted really strange. He didn't even congratulate me. A few hours later, he told me that I was trying too hard and that he didn't want a girlfriend that was going to be at work all the time. He also asked me how much I was going to be getting paid because he wanted to make sure it was less than what he earned. So in other words, he was jealous and envious at the same time. Then he insisted that I work around his schedule, so I could only work the days that he was working. Then he told me that if I wasn't spending enough time with him because of my new job, he would break up with me. I took that as the last straw. It was my dream job, but he was making everything terrible. While my entire family was so happy for me, I was crying in bed at night. The next morning, I woke up and texted him and told him that I didn't want to see him. He ran straight to my house. We got in his car to talk, and I proceeded to tell him everything I thought. Then he turned it all around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with, and that if I didn't change, he would break up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm still in love with my extremely toxic ex. After I told him that I needed him to change, he basically turned everything around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with anymore, and that I was the one that needed to change if I wanted to continue in the relationship. And to top it all off, he kicked me out of his car. We didn't speak for about 2 weeks. During that time, I started at my dream job and everything was actually going pretty well. I didn't have the pressure on top of me about him not wanting me to work, and my life was actually getting better. My skin started clearing up and I even started losing weight. In other words, I was really happy. My parents and family were so happy too. But then I see that he starts posting other girls on his Instagram. I knew that he was doing it on purpose, so I tried not to get upset, but I just couldn't help it. Then I made a huge mistake. I messaged him and asked him if he still loved me. Then he called me and we talked on the phone for about 4 hours. By the end of the phone call, we were back together. And guess what? We even agreed to moving in together. I made him promise that he wouldn't be jealous anymore and that he would stop trying to control everything I did. He promised up and down that he would never be that way again. But literally 3 days later, he comes over super drunk, demanding you know what. I said no because my parents were home and I wasn't going to do that in the house with them. Then of course he starts threatening me again, saying that if I don't do it, I don't love him and blah blah blah. So I took advantage and I kicked him out of the house. Then he sent me an essay of a text message breaking up with me and telling me how he doesn't love me anymore. It's been 2 months since that happened. Once again, I'm doing great at work. My family and I are super happy, but I actually miss him. Not only do I miss him, I'm so jealous all the time because I see he's posting girls on his Instagram. I miss being with him and I miss having fun with him, but I don't miss always feeling scared and nervous. I even tried dating a few guys, but nobody compares to him. A few weeks ago, I went on a date with this really nice guy. We connected and went on a few more dates. I posted on my story that I was on a date and my ex went crazy. He actually showed up at the restaurant and told me to come out and talk to him. And I did. I literally left the guy that I was on a date with to go speak to my ex. He told me to leave with him and I said no. He grabbed my purse and threw it on the ground and told me that he would never speak to me again. 3 days later, he was back in my messages begging to see me. But the guy that I was on a date with actually really likes me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I don't know what to do. I love my ex and I want to get back with him, but I know he's crazy. But this new guy's really nice and really caring. What do I do?
Story time about how I screwed my best friend over very badly. So a little background information. I was 17 and a junior in high school, and I'm not gonna lie, this story time gets pretty crazy. So ladies, grab your popcorn because shit's about to get messy. So like I said, it's my junior year of high school and I've had this friend named Tiara for almost a year now. She's such an amazing girl, by the way, like sweeter than honey. She would not even hurt a fly. I don't know how her and I became friends because I am the complete opposite. But her boyfriend is also the complete opposite of her, so I don't know, maybe just opposites attract with her, I don't know. But like I said, her boyfriend on the other hand, he was aggressive and really toxic. And I know you're probably wondering, oh Kaylee, why are you telling me about her boyfriend? You'll see. So pretty much the one night he saved me from a group of hating ass bitches. Literally. A little side story. These girls that wanted to jump me thought I stole a jewel out of one of their gym lockers. Like, girl, ain't nobody want that fucking cancer stick. Thank you very much, though. Well, I told them that I didn't steal their shit, but they still decided they were going to try and jump me. Well, it was a good thing that I was with Tiara and her boyfriend, because when Tiara's boyfriend came around the corner, all I saw were all these bitches just disappear. They ran. They were gone. So I turn around thinking, like, what the heck? And then I see this man with his strap pointed in their direction. And I was like, okay, remind me not to mess with you. Well, then he told me to give him my phone. So I did, and he texted these girls that if they come after me, they're coming after everybody. Quote, I don't play about my family. So he considered us family. Period, I guess. Well, weirdly enough, after that, I had an immediate attraction to my best friend's boyfriend. I didn't think it was serious, and I thought that it was just one of those things that wasn't gonna last that long, so I didn't tell anybody about it, even though I don't know why I would have thought to tell anybody anyways. Well, then the one night things started to heat up when Tiara and Jordan, aka her boyfriend, and I all decided to take ecstasy. Oh, goodness. And we all did it at Tiara's house because Tiara had her own apartment, and yeah, no adult supervision. At first, everything was good. We were all having a bunch of fun, and then Tiara felt really sick and she ended up going to bed. So after a few minutes of her being in her room, Jordan came and sat right next to me. Oh, goodness. Now, yeah, sure, I could have just walked away and said that, you know, I was tired too. But I was kind of hoping something would happen. So at that point, I kind of just froze and didn't really do anything because I was like, oh no, is he going to confess his love for me? Or is he going to tell me that I need to leave? One of the two. But then, because everything works in my favor, he grabbed my hand and he was like, listen, I really like you and I think that we should hang out more. And I was shook at this point. I was like, am I really about to do this to my friend? Like, do I tell her about it? Or is this just ecstasy talking? We don't know. Look at me over here just sitting thinking that I'm gonna steal my best friend's man. Well, then he goes in for a kiss, and at first I leave my head away. I'm like, no, I'm gonna be a good person today. But then he grabbed my chin, looked me in the eye, and we started making out. Yeah. And the thing was, he wasn't even that cute. Like, he was ugly. Yeah. So at this point, I pretty much just said, screw it. What's the worst that could happen? After kissing for a while, we ended up doing the nasty. In the morning, obviously, we pretended that nothing happened. We went our separate ways. That is my dog snoring. No regard that I am trying to film a YouTube video. Anyways, back to the story. No, I was all happy because I thought that I was going to be the side hoe. But, yeah, he shut that shit down real quick. So apparently it was the ecstasy talking. I mean, as he should though, like, whatever. Well, Tiara and I were still best friends. Our friendship was actually doing better than ever for 3 months until the impossible happens. I hadn't been feeling like myself for a little while. And then I also realized I hadn't had my period in like 2 months. How do you just miss that? I don't know. So I ran to the drugstore. I got a pregnancy test. And again, the impossible happens. It says that I'm pregnant. Now listen, I'm going to tell you something. I was not a hoe. Okay, I didn't just sleep around. So I knew who was the baby daddy. It was my best friend's boyfriend. Yikes. Now eventually I was able to tell Tiara that I was pregnant. I just couldn't tell her who was the baby daddy for obvious reasons. I mean, does it make me a bad friend though for not wanting to hurt her feelings? It probably does. Eventually, I get the chance to talk to Jordan when Tiara decides to run out of the house one day. And I tell him, hey, look, I'm pregnant. It's yours. What you want to do? And I tell him that I want him to be a part of the baby's life. Bad idea on my part. Because his response was, if you ever tell Tiara, I will kill you and the baby. Okay, the baby's not going to have a baby daddy in its life. That's fine, whatever. You know, I let it go at that point because I did not want to risk my life. At this point, I can see he wants nothing to do with this kid, so I continue to lie about who the father is. Eventually, the baby is born, and my mom kicks me out not long after, so I am homeless. My child does not have a father, so I, of course, turned to Tiara for help, and she helped me out with getting my GED and finding a job. We even decided to get a place together, even though her man hated me, primarily because I had his kid. Well, I never told her about what happened, but now she is pregnant and she wants Jordan to move in with us. And I told my best friend I didn't know who the baby daddy was, so now she thinks I'm a hoe. Just thought I would add that in there. Okay, everybody, that is the end of today's story time. The girl who did send this in, she said that she plans on telling Tiara about the fact that her kid is her boyfriend's kid. So she said she might send a part 2 over soon. I don't know. We'll see how that goes, but I will be on the lookout for it. Anyways, if you guys like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of me, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. And if you want to know when I post my next video, make sure to click that bell. I usually post on Saturdays, but sometimes life can get a little hectic and I might post a day after or a day before. If you guys want to send in your story time, make sure to click the link down below. Love you guys.
Story time about how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm now 24, but 10 years ago, a new girl moved into our town. Her and I quickly became best friends in school. She would always come over to my house and have dinner with me and my parents. My parents really grew to love her because she was so polite and really cared about me. The only thing was that she never wanted me to go over to her house. At first I thought it might be because she was embarrassed of her house or something. And eventually I asked her and she told me that her dad was abusive towards her mom and that was the reason why she didn't want me to come over. I felt terrible that she had to live like that, so I expressed to my mom that I was really concerned about her. So my mom actually asked my best friend if she wanted to come live with us for a little bit. Let's call my best friend Sarah. Sarah said no because she wanted to be with her mom. But my mom really wanted to help Sarah and her mom. My mom was in an abusive relationship herself when she was younger, so she understood what Sarah and her mom were going through. My mom decided to invite Sarah's mom over for dinner. That's when my mom asked her about their living situation, and Sarah's mom confessed that it was pretty bad. My mom suggested that she should try to get a divorce, and a few weeks later, she filed for divorce. We were also happy because this meant things would get better for Sarah and her mom. And things did get better. Her dad moved out to his own apartment, and a few weeks later, he had a new girlfriend. I was able to stay over at Sarah's house, and it was really fun. One of the times that I was with Sarah at her house, her dad showed up. But he started making me feel really uncomfortable. He told Sarah that I was the prettiest friend she'd ever had. I could see him staring at me. After he left, Sarah apologized. I went home and tried not to think about it. A few days later, I was walking home when Sarah's dad pulled up next to me. Part 2 is up. 2 of how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. One day that I was at Sarah's house, I decided to walk home instead of calling my mom to pick me up. As I was walking home, Sarah's dad pulls up next to me. At this point, I still hadn't forgotten what he had said about me, and I still felt really uncomfortable. He asked me if I needed a ride, and I politely said no. Then he started to laugh and asked me if I was scared of him. Of course I said no, but the truth is that I was. And he said, well, then get in the car if you're not scared of me. And I did. As we got closer to my house, he put his hand on my lap. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I pushed his hand away. Then he asked me why I was being so rude. I told him that he made me feel uncomfortable, that I just wanted to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way home. He said no because it would be dangerous for me to be by myself walking at night. He put his hand back on my lap and told me that I was really sturdy. That's when he grabbed my hand and tried to put it on his lap. Of course, I pulled my hand away really quick. Then he pulled over really fast and tried to kiss me. I was so beyond disgusted. I just started yelling, and this really took him by surprise because he must have thought that I was just gonna let him. While I was yelling at the top of my lungs, I managed to unlock the car and open the door. I basically threw myself on the ground and he started yelling at me, telling me to shut up. He tried to pull me back into the car, but at this point I was laying on the ground, so he had to pick up dead weight. He grabbed my foot and started pulling me back towards the car, but I started kicking him. He told me that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to be friendly. Luckily, a few of the neighbors heard me screaming because I was right in front of their house. They came outside and ran towards me because they saw me struggling with him. That's when the woman said that she was going to call the cops. He tried to tell the lady that I was overreacting and that he had only leaned over to put the seatbelt on, but I took it the wrong way. I told her that he tried to kiss me and she started calling the cops. That's when he drove away. I literally could not believe what had just happened. Finally, the cops arrived and so did my mom. I told them everything that happened, and I even told them that he had made a comment about me in Sarah's house a few days before that. They quickly started looking for his car and found him at a parking lot. They arrested him and he spent 2 nights in jail. His girlfriend then went to bail him out. She told the cops that he was with her and that I was just lying and that I made everything up. She even went as far as to tell the police that I had been hitting on him and that she had been a witness to it. She would even call my house at 2 in the morning and hang up. I even saw her car near my house and by my school, which means she was following me. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I called the police to tell him that his girlfriend was following me. That's when the cops said that I could probably get a restraining order against him and his girlfriend. Sarah and her mom came over to our house after they heard what happened. Of course, they felt really bad, but they weren't surprised. Sarah told me that that's why she never wanted me to come over because her dad had commented things about her friends before. Worst of all is that they couldn't keep him in jail for what he did to me, but a few months later he was finally put into prison because of something else he did. Apparently he had tried to steal a car or something. Remember the crazy girlfriend I told you Sarah's dad had? She kept following me for a long time. She would even show up to my school asking me if I wanted a ride home. Eventually I was able to get a restraining order against her, but she was really scary. A few years ago she tried to follow me on Instagram. I had to block and report her. I mean, what kind of woman would fight for a man like that? The good news is Sarah and I are still good friends to this day. We even went to college together and now have steady boyfriends. Even Sarah's mom remarried and she's really happy with her husband. I look back at what happened as a learning experience, but to be honest, if he ever gets out of prison, I'm scared. Story time about how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and I think he likes me too. Actually, no, I know so because he kissed me 3 days ago. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The story I'm about to tell you guys is pretty bad, so please don't come at me in the comments. I swear I'm a good girl. A little backstory, my sister and I have never really gotten along. She's 3 years older than me and thinks she's the queen of the house. And she's always seen me as competition, which I hate. My mom would always try to make us get along, but it was totally impossible. My sister was always upset at something I did. Eventually, I stopped trying with my sister and I wouldn't make any effort to make her like me. Finally, last year she moved out and I was so happy. We celebrated my 20th birthday at home last year, and of course my sister came over. But she brought this really cute boy with her. Let me tell you guys, it was instant love at first sight. I can't even explain what I felt, I just knew that I liked him. Even my mom made a comment about how good looking he was. And can I just say that I caught him staring at me a few times throughout the dinner. After that, I never really saw him because my sister and I never hung out. Until my sister lost her job because of COVID and had to move back in with us. And this meant that I was seeing her boyfriend a lot more around our house. He was so nice to me. Anytime they wanted to watch a movie, he would always invite me. If they were going to go out to eat or go to the beach, he would always invite me. Eventually, I started saying yes, well, because I liked him. And something told me that he liked me too. And yes, I know it's totally wrong, but I just couldn't help myself. Whenever I knew he was going to come over, I would dress up and look really cute. I also had a pool in the backyard, so I would make sure I was in a bikini whenever he came over. I know this sounds bad, but it's going to get worse. Well, guess what? Around this time, my sister actually got COVID. Thankfully, she didn't get really sick, but she was a little bit under the weather. And of course, she had to quarantine. So she basically stayed in her room and we all were on the other side of the house. Of course, her boyfriend, let's call him Mark. Mark would come over and bring her food sometimes. On one of these occasions, he asked me if I wanted to go to the beach with him and his friends the following day. He knew that I was totally bored because of quarantine, so I said yes. And guess what? He didn't tell my sister that he asked me and I didn't tell her that I said yes. So it was our little secret. The following day, I wore my sexiest bikini and we had a great time at the beach with his friends. While we were at the beach with his friends, I could tell that he kept staring at me. And he caught me staring at him too a couple of times. When we drove back to our house, he made a comment about how good I looked in the bikini. That's when I told him that he looked really good too. From then on, we started flirting all the time, making little comments, staring at each other, and he also started following me on Instagram. So I got to work posting sexy stories all the time, and it totally worked because he would reply to them. That's when I sent him a naughty picture. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and he likes me too because he kissed me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So after flirting back and forth through DM, I finally sent him a cute naughty picture. I mean, not so naughty, but a little naughty. And that's when he sent me one back. Then he sent me a text message saying that he wished he had met me before he met my sister. And I told him I felt the exact same way. The following day, he came to visit my sister like he usually did. My sister had COVID at the time, so he would come every single day. At this point, my sister's quarantine was almost over. So I knew I either had to act fast or talk to him and tell him that we couldn't take things further. My parents had decided to go to our lake house, so I knew I had the house all to myself. And my sister couldn't come out of her room, so he and I were basically alone in the house. That's when he asked me if we could talk. We went to the backyard so that my sister wouldn't hear us, and he confessed that he really liked me, but he didn't know how to feel about it. He also told me he felt really guilty, and I totally understood him. He asked me what I thought we should do, and I just didn't have an answer. We just stared at each other for a second, and then he kissed me. Story time about how I faked being pregnant for 6 months. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm in my late 20s and I have a really successful career. I make plenty of money, I own my own house, and I have 2 cars. But I've always failed in relationships. I had a long-term relationship in my early 20s, but I broke up with him because he just wasn't pulling his weight. I paid for our extravagant lifestyle. He would basically help me with my work and then expect me to pay him. Also, I paid the rent, I paid for the cars, and I paid for every single dinner date we ever had. We also had a joint bank account, which was a huge mistake on my part, because ultimately I was the one earning all the money. After 4 years of dating, I decided to break up with him and I told him to move out of my house. I felt free and I started dating right away. I met this guy one night and he was amazing. He complimented me all the time and made me feel really good about myself. But here's the problem, I tend to fall in love really easily. After that night, that guy and I would talk every single day. He would come over to my place and we would have dinner, but the good thing about this guy was that he had his own money and he was pretty wealthy. His family was also really well off. I totally saw myself marrying this guy, but then eventually we broke up. I found out that he was cheating on me, but also he was doing some illegal stuff in the background. I decided to forgive him for the cheating and everything, but he still wanted to break up. I mean, I was totally shocked because I was forgiving him, but he had no intention of being in a committed relationship with me. So once again, I was single. I decided not to focus on guys at all. Instead, I started going out with my friends and focusing on my career. But you know how it goes. When you're not looking for love, it just knocks on your door, which it kind of literally happened like that. I had some friends come over and they decided to bring some other people that I didn't know. There was one guy that showed up and I knew of him because he was friends with my other friends. He was really cute and we hit it off right away. He asked me out on a date, but I kept saying no because I just didn't want to get into anything. But he really won me over with his personality and I ended up saying yes. And after our first date, I literally thought I was falling in love with him. Like, here I go again. This time I knew that if I got into a relationship with this guy, he had to marry me. So early on in the relationship, I told him that my intention was to marry him, and if his intention wasn't to marry me, then we needed to stop dating. He promised me up and down that he did want to marry me, so I stayed in the relationship. I knew that I wanted him to move in right away, which I know sounds crazy, but I was kind of desperate at this point. My goal in life was to have kids, and I just wasn't getting there. It took me about a week to convince him to move in, and he finally said yes. But he basically told me that he wanted to continue living his life the way he had been before. In other words, he wanted to continue hanging out with his friends whenever he wanted, and I said fine. I was just happy he was committing to something. Then I realized I had to get pregnant in order to tie him down. Part 2 of how I faked a pregnancy for 6 months in order to keep my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After I finally convinced him to move in, I knew that I needed to get pregnant as soon as possible. My goal in life is to be a mom, and because I had so many failed relationships, I knew that I needed to make this one work. The first 2 months of living with my boyfriend were really good, but of course I quickly wanted to get pregnant. I also knew that the only way he would marry me was if I got pregnant, so I got to work. I stopped taking the pill and I didn't tell him, which I know sounds terrible, but here's the problem, I was not getting pregnant. I was off the pill for 3 weeks and nothing happened. I got so desperate, I went to the mall and got a pregnant woman to pee on a stick, which of course came out with a positive result. I went home that night and showed my boyfriend the stick and he was so surprised. He asked me if I was taking the pill, which I said yes, but he got really upset and told me that I probably got pregnant on purpose, which I denied. But then he said the magical words. He said, "I guess we have to get married now." I was so beyond happy, but the problem was that I really wasn't pregnant. So I started gaining weight like crazy. Anytime he left the house, I would eat tons of junk food. I would go late at night to the supermarket and buy tons of junk food. I get Doritos, chips, cookies, and cake and ice cream. I basically ate anything that was sugary. 2 months later, I had gained about 30 pounds, and it looked like I was really pregnant. But my relationship started to fall apart. My boyfriend was upset all the time, blaming me for having gotten pregnant. 6 months into my fake pregnancy, he decided to break up with me. I begged him, but he said he didn't want to be with me and that he needed to be free. That's when I dropped the whole charade and told him I wasn't pregnant. He literally blew up in my face. He actually grabbed a chair and threw it into the TV. He grabbed his stuff and ran away. Of course, he blocked me from everything, so I couldn't contact him. 3 days later, 2 of my cars had been stolen from my driveway, and part of me knew that it was him. But a week after that, he actually reached out and asked me if I wanted to try at the relationship again. But here's the thing, he doesn't have much money, so he can't live the lifestyle I was giving him. I'm pretty sure he only wants to come back because of the money, but I kind of still love him. What should I do? And it was the most magical kiss of my entire life. We then proceeded to make out for about 10 minutes. After that, he told me we needed to make a decision. I told him the best thing for us to do was to just be honest with my sister. We went straight to my sister's room and told her everything. Of course, my sister, being the drama queen that she is, she started throwing things around in her room, and she called my parents and told them everything. Mark got on the phone with my parents and told them that he was responsible for everything, but that he couldn't lie to my sister and that he had to be honest. And yeah, I felt even harder when he said that. That's when my sister had the bright idea to lie and say that she was pregnant and that he had to get married with her. Mark hesitated but said if that was true, then yes, they would get married. I told my sister I didn't believe her and that she needed to provide a pregnancy test. Mark went and got the pregnancy test, and of course, it came back negative. Mark went home and I got on the phone with my parents, and I told him that I would step aside for my sister's happiness. My parents told me that they thought it was the best thing. So I called Mark and told him that he needed to stay with my sister. Now my sister is trash talking me to all her friends, which I expected and I guess I deserve. But should I sacrifice my happiness and his? My sister won't let Mark and I talk at all. When he comes over, I completely ignore him. What should I do, you guys?
Am I the asshole for wanting my mom to be in the delivery room when my wife has our baby? My wife, Alice, 28 female, is 7 months pregnant. She's starting to think about who she'd like to have in the delivery room when the time comes. She said she would really like her dad there for support. Alice is really close with her dad since she was a kid and has only grown closer to him since her mom died, so that was no surprise. I'm completely fine with having Doug there. She said she doesn't want her stepmom there, which is fine. Her stepmom is really sweet, has been so helpful through the entirety of the pregnancy, and I know she will be hurt when she finds out she can't be there, but I can understand. The issue I have is that Alice doesn't want my mom there. My mom has never been my wife's biggest fan, but she is so excited to have a grandchild and has been planning on being in the delivery room the entire pregnancy and likely before. Like I said, my mom has been hard on Alice and can be a little judgmental, but she's still the grandmother of our child and wants to be there. She's also my mother, and I find it unfair that she can have her dad there, but I can't have my mom there. It's a high-risk pregnancy, and Alice has been really adamant about trying to give birth naturally, but she claims that if things take a turn and she wants an epidural or there needs to be an emergency C-section for whatever reason, she is worried about the judgment from my mom because my mom has openly expressed her distaste for both. Additionally, she says my mom is not the nicest to her. I know my mom has been a little harsh about her weight gain, even though about 30 pounds. She was 120 before. Allegedly, when my wife went over to my parents' house recently, she dropped a plate on the floor, and my mom yelled at her while she made her get down on the floor and clean it up.
Oh my gosh.
I understand where Alice is coming from, and while she'll be the one giving birth, he is my child as much as hers, and I feel like I should be allowed to have my mom there. My wife and I got into a scuffle about this before she started crying, and the issue was dropped. She told me that I was being selfish.
If you can solve this riddle, you're a genius. There was this woman and she was a serial killer. She would take men on dates and then poison them and kill them. One day she goes on a date with you. Ooh, but she can't go through with it because she's so in love with you. Eventually you two end up getting married and you buy a house together. When you buy the house, she claims the basement for her work and she says that you're not allowed to go down there. You say okay and you're happily married. But as time goes on, you get really curious and one day she leaves for work and you decide to go downstairs and see what's down there. When you go downstairs, it's pitch black and you reach around the walls to see if there's a light switch to turn on, but there isn't. As you're feeling around the room, there's a light bulb above you that is unscrewed a little bit. You screw it in a little bit more to turn on the light. Immediately you see all the dead bodies that she's ever killed and you're in shock as you're looking around for a while, but then you hear her car pull up in the driveway and she's home from work. You quickly unscrew the light bulb, run upstairs, and sit down. When she gets home, she goes downstairs to check on her dead bodies, and she immediately knew that you were in there. How did she know? Pause this video right now because I'm about to say the answer. It was because the light bulb was still hot.
Have you ever seen a painting that looked extremely realistic? Jake was waiting for his mom when he saw a strangely realistic painting, but he made one mistake that would lead to terrifying consequences. During his mom's doctor's appointment, Jake was sitting alone in the hospital waiting room. That's when he saw the painting. It looked so real, almost like a photo. He was promised ice cream if he sat quietly, but he found himself growing more and more curious. He felt like he needed to move closer to the painting, so he got up and walked towards it. The painting was of an old man, but there was something wrong with it. It seemed like the eyes would follow Jake no matter where he'd walk. But soon something even more unbelievable would happen, something no one can explain. The painting, needless to say, made Jake feel creeped out, but he tried not to feel so scared. It was a painting after all. Then Jake leaned in and saw one weird detail. The old man had unusually long fingers and fingernails. A bit later, Jake's mom came out of the doctor's office, but Jake was nowhere to be found. She called him but got no reply. Then she turned around and saw a very realistic painting on the wall. The boy in the painting looked oddly familiar.
Storytime about how I set up my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm at the airport, so I'm sorry if it's noisy. My boyfriend and I have been together for way too long. When our relationship first started, I was constantly chasing him. He never wanted a relationship and basically didn't want to commit to me. So basically, he was trying to be an F-boy while he was with me. And of course, I let him do whatever he wanted because I was too afraid to lose him. I didn't want to be that annoying, nagging girlfriend, so I just never said anything to him. Fast forward 5 years. I've had a huge glow up since we started dating. I lost weight, I got super fit at the gym, like I have abs now. I opened up my own nail salon, and I even got myself a car and a house. Well, let's just say that he stayed the same. In fact, he has no ambitions to getting a better job or anything, and it really annoys me. He started talking about getting married, and I was like, hell nah. But I don't know how to tell him that I don't want to be with him anymore. I mean, I love him, but I just don't want to be with him anymore. And because I'm too much of a coward to actually break up with him, Part 2 of how I got my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. So I got this girl on Instagram to DM him, and this girl was totally his type. Basically, she looked like me but with blonde hair. So she sent him a little DM. He wasted no time and he got back to her. That same day, they set up a freaking date. So I told this girl that all she had to do was go out with him. Like, meet him at a restaurant, but that was it. Little did I know that she had a crush on him. And it makes sense now thinking about it because my friend recommended her, and my friend afterward told me that she actually had a crush on him. A few days later, she sends me a picture of him sleeping in her bed, without a shirt on. And she basically tells me everything that happened. So now, I have all this proof. But guess what? I actually got really pissed. It broke my heart because I didn't expect him to do that. And he was totally avoiding all my calls and messages. He finally came over to my house, and that's when I showed him all of the receipts. All the pictures and messages between him and the girl. That's when he told me that she drugged him and forced him into doing it. Of course, I knew that wasn't true. Then he pulls out a ring and asked me to marry him. That's when he got on his knees and started begging. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I set up my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. As he's begging on his hands and knees for me to marry him, that's a call from the girl that he cheated on me with. He puts the phone in his pocket and he started acting all nervous, so that's how I knew. That's when I told him to show me his phone. Then he ran to the bathroom and threw it into the toilet. Then he locked himself in my bathroom and basically begged me for 3 hours to stay with him. Told me that he would never be able to find anyone as good as I was, and that he loved me and blah 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 blah. At this point, I told him I was gonna call the cops to get him out, but I just couldn't bring myself to it. I really felt bad for him. I mean, after all, I did set him up. He eventually left and I didn't speak to him for a few weeks. A few days ago, I actually started talking to this new guy. He's been super flaky, and every time we decide to go out, he always bails. So now I'm thinking maybe I should take my ex back. He sent me flowers, but I've been trying to ignore him. But my parents don't want me to get back with him. Part of me thinks that he was probably already cheating on me. I mean, he DM'd that girl really quick. I honestly don't know what to do, and I'm even starting to feel guilty about what I did. At the same time, he totally shouldn't have cheated. What do you guys think I should do?
Why you should always check your pockets, or why I always check my pockets. You never know where you're gonna find. I was in 9th grade. I got kicked out of my Spanish class. I already did a story time on that. I got sent to the guidance counselor and they put me in culinary class. Freshmen typically aren't allowed to take culinary. It's typically reserved for upperclassmen. Since my teacher kicked me out a week late, there weren't a whole lot of other classes for me to go to. So I ended up going there. When I arrived, most of the students had already picked out their hats, their chef coats, so I had to just randomly pick from the bin. I was really scared and intimidated. Anyway, our chef said just grab a random hat and chef jacket, which I did. When she was instructing us on how to make chocolate chip cookies, I stuck my hands inside the pockets, and I felt something. When I pulled my hand out, I had found a gigantic wad of money. It wasn't no tiny wad. No, it wasn't just ones. I want to get on my teacher's good side. I was the youngest student. Going up to her and I was like, hey, I found this gigantic wad of money in one of the pockets. I showed her the wad, and she dead serious looked at me like this. She took it from me, and it was the shadiest thing ever.
Take me on a journey. Take me far away from this life. I'd leave it in a hurry. Let's run away before morning light. You got me hypnotized, mesmerized, blinded by your iridescent sky. So turn the lights low, baby. Let's get high. Stay, nobody's gonna change. You won't ever leave. On my mind again, I'm still not tired of it. Can make you want me, and I may act okay. Say things will stay the same. Say I'm all I need, but every other night I'm begging for that high. I'll come clean. Half the time, just wanna stop. Can't find another you if I'm lost. Can't find another you if I'm lost.
Woman will never look at sticky notes the same way again. Once a young woman came home to find her house empty. She went to the kitchen to get a snack and found a sticky note left on the fridge. But as soon as she looked at it, she realized something was strange about it. It said there is someone in the house. Assuming it could be her brother, she said that's really funny, but the prank's over. No one answered. She walked towards the door, but it was locked. Then she turned around and on the table was another sticky note. It said, "You're not going anywhere." She began to feel scared. She opened the kitchen drawer to try to find something to defend herself, but the drawer was completely emptied. Inside was another sticky note. "You shouldn't play with sharp things." She ran upstairs to her bedroom and locked the door, and quickly called the police and begged them to come as soon as possible. Then all of a sudden the TV turned on by itself. It was loud and static, but on the screen was another note. "Now I have you where I want you." This time the young woman began screaming. Soon the police found her in a corner crying in fear. They searched the house and found no one there. But as soon as the young woman stood up and tried to leave, police found something horrifying. An officer took off a note stuck on the young woman's back and handed it to her. It said, "I was this close."
This is why you should never date multiple people at once. A story time, I guess. This story takes place when I was 17 or 16. Okay, no one cares. It was a long time ago. And girl, back in the day, I was getting played left, right, and center. Played like a game of football. I had a distinct taste for F-boys. And that was going on for some time until your girl said enough. Enough of this buffoonery. I'm not getting played by men any longer. And I am going to become a player myself. I know the logic is really off, but I was 17, so cut me some slack, okay? So my brilliant idea was, I'm just gonna talk to multiple guys, and I will figure out which one I like in the end. And I'm gonna date that one. Now in my mind, the plan was flawless. And they do always say, don't put your eggs in one basket. So I end up meeting a couple of guys, and I really like this one guy, but I decide I'm keeping my options open. Already posted part 2, so go watch it. This is why you should never date multiple people at once. Part 2. So I was talking to like 4 guys and I literally did not like them. But I was determined to keep my options open. I just didn't want another guy to play me. As the time progressed, me and this one guy, the one I really liked, started actually like dating. I mean, we didn't define the relationship, but it looked like a relationship. In my head, you have to like define the relationship. And my man's, he's not doing that. I even met his mom. Now, this is where it gets truly embarrassing. So one day I'm getting drinks with one of those other 3 guys, even though I'm basically in love with this guy. And we're sitting in this cafe, having a good old time. And who walks in through the door? The mother of the guy I want to date. I should have saw this coming, but I was dumb. So my heart dropped and she freaking waved at me. Like, I see what you're about. And needless to say, she told him, and me and the one guy I really liked never talked again.
It's been a while, and I still like the way you look at me. And I feel nice when you come over. Your silly jokes and the way you make me feel complete. I just want us to get closer. I think about it night and day. I'll always make me feel this way. You make me wanna fight for you.
If you're alone right now, don't watch this video. In the winter of 2018, a man who was living alone in the mountains wakes up to find a red ball sitting on his front yard. He assumed the only neighbor he had must have kids, and so he kicks the ball over the fence, goes inside, doesn't think anything of it. That night, he wakes up to the sound of kids laughing outside of his window. He goes outside to check on them because it's the middle of the night, and there's no kids anywhere, but that red ball is back on his property. So he picks it up, brings it in his house, and goes back to bed. The next morning, he goes over to his neighbor's house to let them know that their kids are out in his yard in the middle of the night. But it turns out his neighbor is just some old man who lives alone, and there aren't any kids anywhere in the area. That night, he wakes up again to the sound of kids on his property, and when he looks outside, there's no kids, but that red ball is back on his property. Panicked, he runs downstairs to make sure the one he brought in is still inside, and it's gone. He checked every window and door, and everything was still locked. It didn't make any sense. He decides to look out the window one more time, and off in the distance is some weird, stiff figure watching him.